The Alexander family, a wealthy family with a grand estate that overlooked the Mediterranean Sea, employed Mia, an attractive young maid with tanned skin, at their mansion. Her daily routine consisted of cleaning, preparing, and maintaining the household. Despite the Alexanders' enormous affluence, the relationship between Mr. Alexander and his wife appeared distant, as if it were an old habit that they had both evolved to accept. Mia, as is customary, labored late that evening to prepare dinner for the family. She was aware that tonight was unlike any other. Mr. Alexander's wife was on a business trip, leaving him at home alone in the mansion. Mia was overcome with an unusual sense of fascination regarding the individual with whom she had infrequently interacted. Mr. Alexander was consistently distant and frigid. However, she occasionally observed him gazing at her with a gaze that was slightly too prolonged and conveyed an emotion she was unable to identify. It was during one of these rare moments that Mia inadvertently captured his gaze while cleaning the living room. Although it was only for a brief moment, it was sufficient to induce feelings of unease in her. His eyes were not merely those of a supervisor gazing upon a maid. They were imbued with a profound, concealed significance. Mia couldn't deny that the way he looked at her stirred something deep inside, as she felt a strange shiver travel down her spine. The tension between Mia and Mr. Alexander became apparent as the days progressed. There was an unspoken energy between them whenever they encountered one another. She could not escape the sensation that something was gradually changing, as if the air became thicker. Mia was in the kitchen preparing dinner one evening when she abruptly heard Mr. Alexander's footsteps approaching. She glanced over her shoulder and observed him standing in the doorway, gazing at her with the same intense intensity. This time, there was no formality or distance. His irises were illuminated by an additional emotion, perhaps desire. He inquired, his voice subdued and authoritative, "Could you assist me with something?" Mia, despite her confusion, nodded without hesitation. She deposited the dish and proceeded to approach him, endeavoring to maintain her composure as she accepted the glass of wine he extended. They could not tolerate the close proximity between them. Mia felt her body react as he stood in close proximity, his breath warm against her skin, despite her mind's plea to distance herself. "I believe you are quite attractive, Mia," he said quietly, his voice subdued but resonant with purpose. Mia's heart was pounding as she gazed upward at him. She stammered, feeling the heat rise to her cheekbones. You shouldn't say that." "However, it is the truth," he replied, drawing even closer, his gaze never departing hers. "Your desire has been a source of great frustration for me." He leaned in and kissed her before she could respond. The kiss was slow and deliberate, as if every second extended on indefinitely. Mia experienced a mental lapse. She was unaware of how to halt it. She was unwilling to discontinue it. She reciprocated his kiss, disregarding the potential repercussions in favor of the intense passion that had enveloped them both. Everything underwent a transformation subsequent to that evening. The ambience within the mansion became increasingly electric and charged. Mia was unable to gaze upon Mr. Alexander without feeling a sudden surge of desire, and she was aware that he was also experiencing the same sensation. She received a message from him one evening as she was concluding her work in the kitchen. "I would like to speak with you." Mia's heart beat irregularly. It was some time since they had engaged in conversation beyond the confines of formal greetings. Mr. Alexander was standing near the window with a glass of wine in his hand, and she rapidly cleaned up and entered the living room. He asked, his voice silky and velvety, "Would you like a drink?" Mia hesitated briefly before agreeing, her heart thundering in her chest. The tension between them became palpable as she approached. She was unable to resist the electric current that drew her toward him. They stood there, their gaze locked in a silent exchange, words unnecessary. "You are exceedingly appealing, Mia," he stated, his tone being subdued. "I am consumed by thoughts of you." She was unable to exhale. His words were akin to a confession, and the manner in which he delivered them left her feeling both exposed and desired. We cannot do this," she murmured, but her body betrayed her as she said it. She found herself leaning in, narrowing the distance between them, as her heart screamed for him and her pulse raced. He kissed her once more, this time with greater urgency and passion, before she could resist. She reciprocated, her hands trailing up his torso and drawing him in closer. Soon, the distance between them was entirely erased as the kiss intensified. They were no longer merely two individuals. They were consumed by an insatiable, raging desire. Mia woke the following morning in Mr. Alexander's embrace. The previous night appeared to be a dream, with the heat of their kiss and the intensity of their touch. However, the reality of the situation struck her as soon as she opened her eyes. He reminded her that this was no illusion, as the warmth of his body against hers and the scent of him still lingering on her skin. It was genuine, and they had transgressed a line that could not be reversed. She felt his presence beside her as she rose from the bed, her body aching from the night's fervor. She gazed at him, but he was still asleep, his countenance expressionless and almost tranquil. Mia was experiencing a state of mental confusion, and her pulse was beating rapidly. She was consumed by the events that had transpired, the implications for her, and the implications for the future. Mr. Alexander was observed enjoying his coffee at the dining table as she descended the stairs later that day. His gaze was piercing as she entered, and he gazed up as if nothing had changed. However, Mia was aware of the situation. Everything had undergone a transformation. "Good morning, Mia," he said, his voice calm and unaffected, as if nothing had occurred. She was unable to meet his gaze. Although she could sense the tension between them, she muttered, I'm fine." He repeated, "You are exceedingly attractive." This time, his tone was considerably more subdued. "Last night was unforgettable." Mia was unable to formulate a response. She was unable to do anything but sit down as her heart continued to pound. She was ensnared in this web of desire and remorse, unable to escape but also unwilling to do so. Mia was aware that there was no turning back now, as the stillness between them was thick. The fervor between them would only intensify. The days that followed their encounter were characterized by a palpable sense of tension, as if an electric charge hovered in the air whenever they were in close proximity. Mia endeavored to concentrate on her household duties, maintaining a respectful distance from Mr. Alexander. However, each glance and inadvertent touch of their hands ignited a surge of desire within her. She was unable to suppress her thoughts of the passion they had shared, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to disregard the attraction that was intensifying with each passing day. Mr. Alexander's presence was as commanding as ever as he approached Mia one evening while she was tidying the living room. She could feel the warmth of his body as he stood mere inches away from her, causing her chest to flame up. "Mia," he said gently, his voice tinged with desire. "We must cease to maintain the illusion that this did not transpire." Her body trembled slightly as a result of the intensity of his words, and her heart skipped a beat. She murmured, "We must cease this practice," but she was uncertain whether she truly desired to do so as soon as the words escaped her lips. He approached her with his breath still heated on her face. He inquired, his lips nearly grazing hers, "Why not? You want this as much as I do." Mia's intellect begged her to distance herself from him and to abandon this perilous course. However, her body betrayed her. She drew closer to him, engulfing his lips in a kiss that was tinged with desire and yearning. Their passion was reignited, and this time, there was no turning back. Their hands entwined as they advanced toward the bedroom, their caresses intensifying with each passing second. Mia was utterly absorbed by the undeniable fire between them, losing herself in the intensity of the moment. At that instant, there was no other consideration. Next morning, Mia awoke with the burden of the events still weighing heavily on her in her chest. She lay there for a moment, gazing upward at the ceiling in an attempt to comprehend the situation. They had both been consumed by an ardent frenzy the night before, which had been wild. But now, in the light of day, reality was dawning. What actions had they taken? What was the implication of this for her? She peered over at Mr. Alexander, who was still asleep beside her, his arm draped over her waist. The warmth of his body was reassuring, but it also served as a reminder of the perilous situation they were now in. Mia endeavored to rise without arousing him. However, his eyes briefly opened as he stirred. He gazed at her with a smile, his eyes beating with contentment. "Good morning," he said gently, his voice still thick with sleep. Mia was uncertain about what to say. She was uncertain about the nature of their interaction, experiencing a combination of excitement and remorse. She was unable to deny the profound attraction she felt toward him. However, she was aware that they were inadvertently crossing a line that should not be crossed. "I am uncertain as to whether we should continue with this," Mia stated, her voice slightly trembling. "It appears to be an error." Mr. Alexander's expression was grave as he sat up. "While it may provide an uncomfortable sensation, it is in our mutual interest. Mia, we are unable to resist it. The greater our efforts, the more difficult it is to maintain our distance from one another." Mia experienced an increase in her pulse rate. His statements were accurate, however, they also caused her to be horrified. She was uncertain as to whether she was prepared for the repercussions of their actions. However, she was aware that this was not the end as she gazed into his eyes. It had only recently commenced. The bond between Mia and Mr. Alexander continued to strengthen as the days passed. Despite their efforts to maintain the secrecy of their relationship, the intensity between them rendered it impossible to conceal. In every moment they shared, the desire was palpable, and each touch was more desperate than the last. Mr. Alexander summoned Mia to his study one evening following supper. The mansion was devoid of noise, with the sole exception of the gentle rustling of the wind outside and the echoing of their footsteps through the corridors. Mr. Alexander was watching the garden from the window when Mia entered the room. His gaze was intense as he turned upon hearing her approach. "I am unable to remain apart from you, Mia," he stated, his voice resonating with yearning. "I require your assistance." The words he spoke resonated deeply within Mia, causing her pulse to race. She endeavored to resist, but it was an impossible task. The attraction between them was excessively intense and magnetic. Mia confessed, her voice quivering. I am unsure of what to do. This is not a straightforward matter. This is hazardous." Mr. Alexander approached her, his hand tenderly extending to embrace her face. "We have already crossed that threshold. There is no turning back at this time." He kissed her before Mia could respond, his lips engulfing hers in a passionate embrace. Her body responded to the heat between them, melting into him. They advanced toward the settee, their hands examining each other's bodies with a sense of urgency. Each kiss and contact were indications of what was to come. Mia did not know how much longer she could continue to do so. The passion, the exhilaration, the guilt, it was all too much. However, she was unable to halt as Mr. Alexander's hands moved over her. She was trapped in the flames, and there was no escape. Like what you heard. There's plenty more heartbreak and secrets to come. Hit like, subscribe, and stay curious with Tangled Truths.